Hello, welcome back to my little YouTube channel. It's been a while. January was busy, as I predicted, but I'm back. And despite January being busy, I did find a good amount of time to read. I'm doing this thing where I'm trying not to look at my phone before bed. That is the kind of common sense advice that I feel is kind of falling into the same category these days as like eat your vegetables, go outside sometimes, like stuff that it's like, yeah, like, and I'm really disappointed to report that I am in fact sleeping better now that I'm not looking at my phone. So I've started reading like bedtime books that are like definitely have more simple like language and plot. So I got through quite a few this month. But yeah, let's dive into it. The first two books I read this month were library books, and I have already returned them. So hopefully, I will figure out how to put a picture of them like here in editing. I haven't figured that out yet, but hopefully by the time this is posted, I will have figured that out. I guess you'll see. Anyway, the first book I read is was called The Locked Ward by Sarah Pekkanen. I like to start every year with like a mystery thriller that really has little value other than being entertaining. And this is a tradition that I have had for several years now, to the point where I have to do it. I have to do it. I don't read a ton of books like that anymore just because honestly a lot of them kind of annoy me. I feel like the more books I've read, the more like popular thrillers just feel bad to me. The writing is bad, the dialogue is weird and stilted. Oftentimes, there's at least a plot hole or two. If someone has a recommendation for a popular thriller that was actually good, please let me know. Even if it's not a super popular thriller, just any thriller that like doesn't completely suck, let me know. Anyway, as you might have predicted, The Locked Ward was, I wanted to know what happened. I kept reading it. Was it good? No. The dialogue was very awkward and stilted. I think there was some weird things with the timelines that didn't quite add up for me. There was some weird characters, and not like weird as in good, quirky weird, weird as in like that doesn't really work kind of weird. Anyway, let's back up. The Locked Ward is about this woman, and she gets a call from prison. Well, not really prison. It's like a inpatient care facility for people with severe mental health issues who have also committed a crime. So, like a locked ward. These sort of places do exist in real life. A lot of times, people are sent there instead of jail if they like there's reason to believe that they need treatment rather than just like punishment. And she gets a call, and there's this woman claiming to be her twin sister. They were both adopted, but into separate families. And the twin sister says that she has been accused of killing her like adopted sister, and that's why she's there. And it kind of goes back and forth between the two women and kind of trying to put together the pieces of what actually happened because the woman who didn't, you know, commit the crime or like wasn't involved in this at all is trying to put together the pieces to see like, okay, is this woman telling the truth? Is she actually my sister? Like, what's going on? Like, why were we separated? This feels like there's like a lot more to the story. And then the woman who is locked up in the locked ward is also has a lot of things to figure out herself. Kind of the bigs, like why did this happen? Why me? All of that sort of stuff. And again, like I thought the dialogue was a little eh. a lot of the plot relied on like twin intuition, which didn't really make sense to me because I don't think the whole twin intuition thing is like a mystical force. Like, I think it's something that you develop if you have been with someone from literally the womb and you're with them all the time. You kind of have an intuition about each other, and can kind of sense when something's off or something's different. Like, I don't think like the twin intuition thing really works if the twins were separated at birth. And then there was some like weird stuff with the characters like in the ward. Like, there was this one character that was supposed to be like the creepy guy, but like he was written kind of like as a caricature and didn't really add a lot to the plot either. So didn't really enjoy that. But I don't know. I'd read another book by this author like a couple of years ago, like not as like my January book, but this is like before I gave up on just kind of like general popular thrillers. And I also thought that one was pretty bad, so I don't know. I thought I should try again. Um, I don't know. I usually will give an author a second chance if I like read one book by them and like don't like it. If they have another book that seems like interesting, like sure, I'll pick it up. But like, I don't, Sarah, I don't know if I'm picking up a third book. But yeah. Anyway, the second book that I read is called The River by Peter Heller. This is a sort of book which was also like kind of thrillery. I wouldn't have picked this up on my own though. I picked this up because I was talking to the librarian as I was checking out with like the locked ward, and I was talking about how I always read a thriller and I have an issue with a lot of popular thrillers. I don't know. I kind of think of them as like junk food a little bit. Where like, you know, when you're eating it, you're like, objectively, this is not good food, and I know this is not like good for me. This is not benefiting my body in any sort of way. Neither is it like objectively good food, yet I can't stop shoveling it into my mouth. But I was just kind of talking about how I didn't like a lot of thrillers just kind of like didn't really vibe with me, and I, you know, I read them sometimes, but I haven't really found one that I thought was actually great. And he recommended this book to me, The River. And he was like, I really like this. I wouldn't really say it was a thriller in the traditional sense. It's about two college age boys, and they're on a canoeing trip up in the Canadian wilderness. And then one day they realize that there's like a wildfire in the distance, and they need to paddle back to civilization like their life depends on it. And then one day when they're paddling, they hear this couple arguing off on the banks of like the river, but it's really foggy, so they kind of can't see them. And they paddle up a little bit ahead and they feel kind of weird about it, so they decide to turn around and kind of see what's up. They see the guy, he's really shaken up. He was like, I don't know where my wife went. So they go looking for the wife. I feel like after this, if I were to say more, it would be kind of spoilery. But I definitely did enjoy this book more than The Locked Ward. It's definitely not the sort of book that I would pick up all the time. Honestly, like, I don't. There was a lot of elements about it that just, like, wouldn't make me drawn to it initially. Like, I don't think I've read a book that's in, like, a wilderness setting in so long, nor have I read a book about, like, two 20-year-old guys. It's just like those are elements that are like generally missing from a lot of the books that I read, and like that's fine. But it was good to try something new. I did think that the dialogue and the story and everything was better than some of the other like thrillers that I've read. As I said, like it was definitely a lot different than them, just like the elements of the story. So like maybe that contributed. Maybe it just kind of felt like a breath of fresh air. But I did say, I think in my like 2026 reading goals video, that I did want to read more books that I normally wouldn't pick up, just kind of like expand my horizons. So I think this is a really great way to do that. You know, and I came at recommendation from one of my local librarians. Great. Yeah. Let's get into the books that I physically have. The first one is going to be We Computers by Hamid Ismailov. This is a book that was recently translated from Uzbek, and it follows a guy who's like a poet, a psychologist, kind of a hobby level computer guy, and he starts to wonder if he can kind of like recreate a poet's life based on the stuff that they've written in their poetry, just kind of like based on like I don't know, like the elements of the poetry and like maybe like the psychology a little bit. And honestly, this book was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. It's written in this really odd stylized way because a lot of it is supposed to be like the computer talking and just kind of like spitting out like what it thinks about this poet's life, or generating poetry that they think like this poet would have written. And it was confusing at times to kind of know like what was real and what the computer was just spitting out. It was kind of disorienting in a way that I think kind of mirrors our current situation with AI. This was originally written in, I think, like 2021 or maybe 2022. So this came out kind of before all of the stuff that we have now that's causing internet issues and kind of all making us question our reality and like wonder what's real and what's not. I think in the age of like AI songs genuinely going viral and, you know, hitting the top of charts, whether it just be Spotify or like a Billboard chart, I think that this, I don't know, it was interesting to read. I wouldn't even really go as far to say that this had a particular message. It maybe does, and it potentially went over my head because I said like this was a lot more challenging than I originally thought it would be. But I do think it's worth it. And if you also have been thinking a lot about AI and kind of what that means for us in terms of the arts, this could be an interesting read. Just be warned. It's like if you're just getting back into reading after not having picked anything up in 10 years, like you might want to start somewhere else. But yeah, that's what I have to say on that. I think I might have more to say if honestly, if I was more confident that I completely understood this, but I'm not. So okay, next up is Flat Earth by Anika Jade Levy. This came out, I think, in the fall of 2025, so this is a pretty recent release. And this is about two girls in their mid 20s in grad school. One of them is trying to make like a film, and the other one is trying to write a book of little like cultural observations, I think she calls them. And they're living in New York, and they're just kind of struggling through. And this really has a lot of the elements of books that I like. However, this one did kind of fall flat for me a little bit. Like, don't mind the pun. It is called Flat Earth, and I think maybe some of the flatness was maybe intentional, but I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. This is literary fiction, and I think this kind of fell into a lot of the pitfalls that I am finding more and more often in modern literary fiction, where it just kind of feels maybe a little bit too minimalist, too detached. Doesn't really feel like it's saying anything new. It's just kind of regurgitating kind of the general cultural malaise that we've all been feeling. And I think that that can kind of be a little bit cathartic, but at the same time, like, I don't think this did it particularly well. I don't know. There was really just nothing that like stood out to me. I did think this was interesting because it did kind of show a contrast between like the coastal elites in New York and just kind of like everyday America. The character who's trying to do the film, she goes to a lot of different conventions for a lot of different kind of like fringe political groups in the South and the Midwest, and she winds up getting married and moving to South Carolina. I don't know, but like I don't think it explored that contrast effectively, nor did it say anything particularly interesting about it, in my opinion. So I don't know. This fell flat for me. Flat Earth fell flat for me. Moving on, this is the one classic that I read this month. That is Ethan From by Edith Wharton. And I loved this. The intro said was best read in one sitting, and I said, okay. And I read it in one sitting. And I think that was the way to go. This is really short, but it was very punchy. This, if you're not aware, is about the titular Ethan and his, I don't know, unfortunate situation. The story opens up from the perspective of a guy who's visiting the town that they all live in, and he sees this Ethan guy, and he's just kind of like, what's up? It seems like there's no light behind his eyes. And then someone in the town's like, there's a reason for that, let me tell you. And then so it kind of goes back in time and tells the story of Ethan and his wife that he felt kind of obligated to marry in a certain way. The wife was helping to take care of his like terminally ill mother towards the end of her life. And then when the mother passed, he was just kind of like, you know what, let's get married. Because he didn't really have anyone else. And also, she had just, been helping and him take care of his mother, and that's like that's a big deal and whatever. But honestly, like at this point there's really no passion in the marriage, and also his wife's a little bit of a hypochondriac, and that kind of bothers him. It's a source of irritation, and because she's a hypochondriac, she believes that she needs like a full-time helper, so her cousin comes to stay so she can help them. And then he starts to fall for the cousin because it's a more genuine connection. It's not a connection that was forged over a short period of time that was like really rough and traumatic for both parties. As you can imagine, chaos ensues. And that's all I'll say. But read this. It was pretty short. This edition that I have, I think, is like 130 something pages, and a lot of editions are shorter than that because this is like a physically small book, so they can fit less on each individual page. But this is my first Edith Wharton, and trust, I will be reading more. So, congrats, Edith. You've piqued my interest. Okay, the next book that I read was The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This was fun. This was fun. I don't know if it was necessarily trying to be anything other than fun, but I would say, check, objective achieved. This is about a woman who is single, and she comes home from her friend's like bachelorette night, and there's a man in her house, and she freaks out obviously because like, oh my god, there's a random man in her house. And he freaks out, and he was like, why are you freaking out? Like, I'm your husband, like you should know I'm here. He kind of thinks that she's like maybe like too drunk and like just playing a game that's not funny. And she looks at her phone while he's locked out in the hallway because she pushed him out because she was scared. And she's like, oh my god, this guy is actually my husband. And she discovers that her attic generates husbands. It generates husbands. So if she can get him to climb up the stairs, he'll go away and a different guy will climb down, and she can, try that guy out. And this was really interesting. It was really fun. I think it had an interesting kind of parallel and mirror. Might be probably an intentional parallel mirror to kind of like dating app culture. When the possibilities feel infinite, people are less likely to try to just like make it work with someone. And so a lot of attachments are pretty superficial. They, you know, fizzle out after like any sort of issue or problem because there's so many fish in the sea. You can literally have anyone, but no one's perfect. And you will have to eventually narrow down what is a deal breaker for you and what flaws you can potentially put up with in someone, and find someone who meets that criteria and then try to make it work with them. Like that's how that works. But yeah, I don't know. It was fun. I had a good time. Yeah, I feel like this one had gotten mixed reviews, but it was fun. I apparently don't have any other adjectives. But yeah, that's that. That's The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. The last book that I finished in January is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And I think I said in my winter TBR that this is something that I've been wanting to get to for a while, and that I definitely wanted to get to at some point this winter. And guess what? I did. And I'm glad I did. This honestly, like, this was good. I was right. Like, I was gonna like this, and I did like this. This is about a woman. She's older. She lives in this remote village in Poland, and people in her village and kind of like greater area, like town, start turning up dead. And you spend the book trying to figure out why. She is very convinced that this is animals taking revenge. She is very big on animal rights, and all of the people who are turning up dead are people who have treated animals poorly in one way or another. There's a guy who hunts a lot, and when he dies, he had freshly killed like a healthy young deer. There is a guy who runs a fox farm to make fur coats, and just like a variety of people who, like, just in general in their life have treated animals poorly. And yeah, I really like this. I really love like a quirky old woman character. I don't think there's enough of them. That's partially why I really loved The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington, which I read back in June of 2025. But yeah, let me know if you have recommendations for more like quirky old lady characters, because I think that's fun. I think that's cool. I think a lot of the books that I read and a lot of the books that are popular are about like a younger woman, and that's fine. That's more relatable for me. I don't know. It's kind of fun to get the perspective of somebody like much older, even if the author writing it isn't much older. Like you at least get kind of like that perspective. I think that sometimes as women we kind of feel like we expire and stop being important after a certain age. I think we are kind of conditioned to believe that what is on the outside is most important, even if like consciously we don't believe that. So it's really, really cool to hear from a perspective of a woman who doesn't have that anymore. Like the exterior has crumbled a little bit, she has aged, yet she still has a fun story to tell, narrate, go on, whatever. But yeah, I enjoyed this for that. I enjoyed this because it did kind of have some mystery thriller elements. It was definitely a lot more literary than a typical mystery thriller. I wouldn't say there was any point where I was on the edge of my seat, like wanting to know what happened. I did want to know what happened, and the little twist at the ending, I feel like I should have seen coming, but yeah. If you've read this, let me know what you think. Yeah. But I think that's all for today. That is what I have read in January. And I hope to be back at the end of this month, having read another great crop of books I can tell you about. But also, hopefully, I'm back sooner than that with a different video. But yeah, that's all for today. Bye!